Hello, everyone, and welcome to Curtain Call. My name is Lia Grainger, one of the co-hosts of this weekly interview series with powerful women in the arts. Curtain Call is presented by FabCollab, and it's supported by Factor and Heritage Canada. And what we do is we speak with different women around Canada and around the world every week about their work and about what they do and why they do it. And this week we have a wonderful... Very excited to speak with. She's a very talented musician. She's a classically trained violinist and viola player. There she is. She has been awarded... She's been recognized with the Canadian Aboriginal Music Awards, Canadian Folk Music Awards for her artistry. Welcome, Alyssa Delbaere-Sawchuck.
Thank you so much. We finally figured this out. I'm sorry.
We did it. Honestly, that was less tries than it often takes. So well done.
It worked in the test run, and then when it came to real time, sometimes.
I know, but it's the world that we're living in. I think everyone over the last year and a half has learned that it's just part of life now. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you. I don't think we've had like a string instrumentalist like yourself. So it's really exciting to be able to speak to someone that can sort of illuminate us about what you do.
This is my first IG live interview, so this is also very exciting for me.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, they're pretty fun. Like, it's been a really wonderful way to stay connected with musicians and artists, and then also just to meet a lot of wonderful people and be able to share, because we all see each other's shows and these kind of things, but it's not often that we all get to actually hear people talk about what they're doing and why they do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
love that.
With that in mind, maybe you could tell us just a little bit about what drew you to violin and viola, fiddle, all of this in the first place, like sort of as a young person, because I know you started quite young.
I did. So my story my musical story and upbringing starts in Winnipeg, where I was born. I'm of Red River Métis ancestry, tracing back to the roots of the grandparents of Louis Riel, one of the founding fathers of Manitoba, and also somebody who really fought for minority and Indigenous rights here in Canada. So having just that lineage to carry through with me, but also having a Ukrainian background on my father's side, where my grandfather, who I lost recently, he used to play in a wedding band with his siblings. And so I also have siblings that I have played with or play with regularly in the Métis Fiddler Quartet. And we all started about the age of 3 in the Suzuki method in Winnipeg. And it was when I was about 8 years old that I really was interested in branching out beyond the classical repertoire and learning about different types of music. And one of those first introductions was to Celtic fiddling. And then around the age of 10, we moved to Toronto, relocated to Toronto, and having so much more opportunities open up for me here in the city. And so many synchronicities. For example, we moved down the street from Anne Letterman, who's an ally and a researcher and somebody who's really documented and revitalized, preserved Indigenous fiddling and fiddlers, recorded fiddlers in the 1980s, and still continues to do that work today of archiving and going through the archives. So she lived down the street from me and us. And so,
as a child?
Yeah.
Like when you were growing up?
Yeah, when we first moved to Toronto. So I was able to really have this amazing resource from a young age, like just so much gratitude, so much luck. Some of this is like luck, like luck and opportunity, those things lining up. It's just, that's where you're headed on the right path.
Was it something that you loved from a young age? Because I know sometimes people are like put into music classes, or were you like, yeah, this speaks to me even as a kid?
Well, so true story, of course this is all about truth, but real true story, when I was 9 years old, I was preparing for a competition, and it was the first competition that I ever did. It was the youth orchestra competition, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to have fun. And I ended up winning the competition. And that was kind of like this launching pad for reassurance of saying like, hey, I can freaking do this. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to step into this space of like being a musician, like from a young age. And like, I know that, you know, like compared to my father, who's a doctor, like I'm not going to be able to have that kind of salary, but you know what? I'm going to have a freaking good time. I'm going to have lots of fun.
Like, I wonder how common it is to sort of at that age be like, oh no, I can be like a professional musician. Like this could be a career. Because I feel like often there's a lot, I mean, I'm sure there's other people like you, but a lot of people come to it later, sort of when they're like, no, I need to follow my passion. But to be put into it at a young age and then also be passionate about it and then also realize that you're good at it is quite a combo.
Yeah, I've been really lucky in the kinds of reassurances and kind of little messages that I've received from teachers and friends and colleagues in the universe of just being like, oh yeah, this is what you are meant to be doing, like, you know, and really know that you can be supported regardless of whatever it is, like just, you know, not really thinking about abundance instead of looking at it from that scarcity mindset of being like, oh, you know, I wish I could do this and da 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 da. Like, no, I'm gonna do this, and when COVID is like no more, then you know it's gonna be on stage and that's it, you know.
100%, absolutely. I wonder, could you tell me a little bit, because you have this background in classical and then you're working in these Métis fiddling traditions, and I imagine, like, I know you're in Kune, the band that is like a huge mishmash of all these beautiful traditions. So like how do you, like, do you still love classical? Are you still connected with that? Like, and is there one you like more than the other? And can you tell us a little bit about what defines them? What makes these styles different?
So what's really interesting here is the classical upbringing and that bringing that together with the Métis side is something that it like kind of represents me as a person, like this mixed ancestry of these two kind of things like coming together. Like, okay, so the indigenous or the traditional or many types of world music learning comes through this oral tradition, comes through in these social practices, in these like festive kind of ways where, you know, there isn't a rehearsal. It's just like, it is always a constant rehearsal. It's always a constant practice. It's always a like constant joy of just doing it, rather than the you know, the classical side of it being like really like, you know, individual hard work and discipline and how those two things collide. So it's interesting in Kune how there's this kind of like dynamic of clash of traditions where it's like, okay, usually it's just like a song or music sharing. But no, we're actually in this space of we're rehearsing. Like, we actually need to be disciplined.
Yeah. It's funny when it's like you're working in this sort of like world music traditions that are exactly as you described, where they're oral traditions. Like, there's not like sheet music a lot of the time, or like all of these different things that you'd see in classical, because it's the same in flamenco. But then you get to a point where you are rehearsing it to the point where every little thing is set, and you are kind of like starting to treat it more in that classical mentality. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I want to address your question about like, is there a music that you like more than the other? I really am trying to like move away from hierarchy, and so it's like, I like this right now. I choose this right now. I choose this, and to really in this like disciplined way of living in a realm of infinite possibilities. Like, so allowing the art to speak for itself, you're just like the channel of like this voice that's coming out. And to really think about it that way, rather than like, I need to like duplicate and replicate the way that I'm playing this every single time. Like, that'll drive you freaking crazy.
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of like not labeling what you're doing, like not being like, okay, now I'm doing this type of music. Now I'm doing this type of music. Now I'm doing a blend, but just being like, I'm doing music, kind of.
Yeah, well, just allowing for the spaciousness that needs to be there in order for like the magic to happen. Because if you're so worried about the outcome, then you remove the flow of the magic, and that there's something like when there's magic, it just sparkles, and it's just like even it brings us into a more instead of it being like robot, it like brings in like the humanistic side of things, which and brings in vulnerability. It brings in courage. It brings in all these things that we don't want to see in the arts, where we're so used to things being so perfect, and it's exhausting being perfect.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, like you said, a lot of these art forms are often improvisational in their traditional setting. So it is like that is like where the energy comes from. Like I feel that way about flamenco, where I'll go see like a beautiful like theater show, but it doesn't like really move me in the same way as if I go to like a party and it's just amateurs kind of improvising to the music. Is yeah, it like hits me at a different level. And it sounds like it's sort of like a similar sort of feeling that comes from what you're doing.
Well, it's also interesting to live in this space of between needing to make money to survive, but also creating for the sake of creating. And I have this conversation a lot with my partner about like how to live in this space of like, okay, not worrying about the financial outcome of like, can I make money off of this like art piece that I'm going to create, or can I just like do it and believe in myself? You know, so it's kind of like there's like that's like the delicate dance.
So how do you do that? Tell us. How have you struck this delicate balance? Because I mean, I think it's like the dance that all artists are doing.
Like doubt is a killer. Like as soon as there's doubt that comes in, it's like, okay, whether it's external doubt or internal doubt, like then, you know, a little bit of investigation needs to happen, and maybe some nurturing, like maybe that like some tenderness with that doubt, like why is that happening? It doesn't need to be here. Can it be here along with all the other things that are going on, the excitement, the creation, the unknown?
I mean, I know. I mean, I feel like all artists doubt themselves. Like I mean, maybe some don't, and that would be nice, but I think it's just part and parcel. And yeah, you kind of just have to like ride with it. But yeah, that is like a major factor when you're in the creation process. Can you just to like back up a little bit, because I know some people might not be super familiar with Métis fiddling. Would you be able to just like briefly explain sort of like how that tradition developed? Because I think it's super interesting, and yeah.
So Indigenous fiddling and fiddlers and Métis fiddling here in Canada was brought over by the European settlers and colonizers, particularly like men that were coming here to participate in the fur trade. A number of reasons why the fiddle is something that became so popular. Well, it's really joyful music, this Celtic music. It gets you up to, it's dancing music, right? So and you know, after like a heavy day of paddling, or even maybe several days, it's like, okay, let's bring some joy and lightness to go along with this like heaviness of the work that we're doing. But also the violin or the fiddle being like kind of easy to transport. It's small. It's not like other instruments where it's like heavy and bulky. And for that reason, you know, all this traveling was happening, and there's so many different influences within the tradition. And there's also a lot of preservation that happened. For example, there's a Cree community that's very well documented with the Fiddlers of James Bay, where Orkney Island Scottish fiddlers came there, or people came there, and the fiddlers taught the music to the people that were living there. They loved it, and it became part of their own culture. And it's really interesting how the music was sort of preserved in this very unique way in these remote communities that had very little contact with the outside world. Now, in other communities that are less isolated, where they would have radio signal and they would have dances, and they're closer kind of to to the U.S. border, particularly in Manitoba, little by little, the fiddlers that were performing at dances were being asked to play other music, like more modern music, and so little by little, sort of the tradition was being lost. The older music was not as popular because people wanted to hear newer and newer things. So not
when
only
was this happen? Like in what time period was that happening?
As soon as the radio kind of hit community.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not good with like knowing exactly.
No, sure.
And things are very fluid anyways.
Right.
So, but it's just like, it was like kind of like a little by little kind of thing that happened over time. So not only did the music, was it impacted by the church and by the fact that, Indigenous people were practicing this music, and it became part of their culture, and therefore, kind of forced into hiding. There was also this technology piece that isn't spoken about quite as much, that also influenced the sort of the slow kind of, I don't want to say like death, but little by little, like people were not playing it anymore, and therefore it wasn't being passed on. So it was like really important, the work that Anne did in the 1980s, where she went and did a whole bunch of field recordings to record the fiddlers who still had the knowledge of these tunes, even though that they hadn't played them in a long time. To have that documented was really important. And she worked with someone who became a mentor to me as well, Lawrence Teddy Boy Houle, who also, he passed away about a year ago now. And so ever grateful to have had Teddy Boy come through my life as well. And, he lived in Winnipeg. And so every time I went to go visit my grandparents, I got to also visit this man who also became like a grandparent to me. And having that just was so special. And in fact, like one of the last concerts that I got to perform before COVID hit was I got to play with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, an orchestra that I grew up watching as a young girl, thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be cool one day if I got to play there? Well, I got to play not only with the orchestra, but they were playing my piece, and my grandparents were in the audience, and Teddy Boy was in the audience, and he sort of said something to the effect of like, okay, now I can go to heaven. My work here is done.
Wow. That must have been quite a day for you.
It was quite a day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite an accomplishment. So, like, can you tell us a little bit about like what separates this style like from other styles musically?
Well, so the Indigenous fiddle music is all rooted in Celtic styles of music. It's in the way that it's shared and performed that makes it sort of different, and in the way that that happens is that the fiddlers have this sharing circle, so they would each individually play their tunes, while as in a Celtic Ceilidh style, everybody's playing the same tune all together. So it's like a fiddle orchestra versus a fiddle solo.
Okay.
And because of this difference, the fiddlers adopted this way of playing the tunes that is very improvisatory. So not only is it improvisatory because they're changing up the subtleties in the melody and the way that they're playing it, but they might also decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to take a piece of this. Okay, if we imagine a pie for this phrase, I'm going to take like a little section of this pie out the next time I play the piece, and I'm not going to tell my guitar player. Or maybe I'm going to take like a sixth of the pie here and like a third of a pie over here. Or maybe I'm going to have a whole pie and then add another little third over here. So it's it's got this like improvisatory nature and this game that's being played between the fiddler and whoever's accompanying it, and whether that would be the guitar or the piano, which these instruments came into practice later. Originally the fiddler would have just played by themselves, or with like people play spoons with it, or they would take knitting needles and tap the side of the fiddle. So it was like, just, they were so used to having these kind of more just percussive elements, and not necessarily worried about, okay, when you're coming up with a piece and you're going to play a piece, there's kind of a standard order of things, right? And so they're not used to that. They're used to they're kind of like, I can do what I want.
Nice. There's some agency there.
Yes.
Was there any was it challenging to you at all to like sort of like, I guess you were learning them all from such a young age that it must have all felt like very like in you.
Well, it became a part of me, and I'm still learning how to let go of this sense of like, okay, how do I, like, there's always like a bit of like, how do I do this? Like, it's, as we were learning something, it's always like, okay, you're taking a little step here and a little step there, instead of like trying to make huge strides and really like grasping and standing onto those like little steps initially. So what's interesting is when I was learning from Teddy Boy, he knew that, technically, like, I was, could play had more abilities on the instrument. So his way of kind of like showing me was by always playing like the music a little bit different to trick me, which was kind of fun. So it's like, this is like this game of like like, it's not about like who's better or worse or whatever, but it was just kind of like
yeah, he's like playing with you.
He was playing with me. It was always a little bit of a game, and so I had to like let go of intellectualizing it, and of like of trying to figure out the structure of like, okay, this phrase is exactly this, because sometimes it was like an 8-bar phrase, and sometimes it was a 7.5, and sometimes so just kind of figuring out my own way of playing it really was part of the journey of learning how to play the music, and also like making it my own, rather than like, okay, now I have to like be a Métis fiddler, and I have to like, forget all of the classical stuff. Okay, I have to include that voice that is very much a part of me in this way that I'm playing the instrument, and also find a new way, so that there is this new channel that I'm creating, without forgetting the two other pieces that I carry with me.
What has been like what's been the response as you've like found your own voice, you have all of these different influences? What is the response among different communities to this work that is sort of yours and that's you, and that may not be like one thing or the other? Like, how do people respond to that from these various communities?
Well, I've definitely received some critique from some fiddlers, because if you're somebody who's really traditional, and you have somebody who is like coming in there with having this classical training, then it is hard for them to kind of accept that their music might be played a little bit differently, and that there's this kind of other way. So it's really about mindset, whether somebody is open to it or not. And now it's about also thinking like, okay, well, that's the way that things were done then, and we are heading into the future, so that things will be different. Things are different now, like, as COVID has taught us, like, we have to be adaptable. And so whether or not I'm invited to a traditional Métis Fiddle Fest versus not, great if I am, great if I'm not. I accept all places and all things.
Tell me a little bit about your doctorate. because we spoke about it earlier, and it just seems like it incorporates so many different things that are like your work. So tell me about that project.
Yeah, it was a really interesting time because I was struggling with, okay, am I going to be a classical musician? Like, am I going to make this like 100% of my gig? Or am I going to, because at the time I was doing classical music gigs where I was subbing in the symphony, but I was also doing lots of chamber music festivals. But also, I was teaching in the Indigenous community. I was teaching Métis fiddling. I was teaching Métis culture. I was working in schools, and so it was like, okay, I have these two different opportunities that are presenting themselves, and time. We have that is we only have so much time and energy every day to dedicate. So I kind of originally, when I went in to do my doctorate, I was really interested because I was really interested in how folk music has really influenced classical music, but also how do we as classical musicians really bring in the spirit, the folk spirit, that traditional spirit of these self-taught musicians who come from this place of they have lived and breathed the tradition, but you can't transcribe that on a page,
No, you can't. You really can't.
Originally, I was interested because Hungarian folk music was kind of the most widely used form of folk music in classical music. Beginning with Beethoven and Mozart and Haydn, like they all had huge influences with the Hungarian music was just so much a part of the music that they were channeling and they were writing, that I was like, okay, so how do I get the message across to more people about, okay, recognizing when a melody may have this folk music element, and how do you also be curious about playing it in a way that is not just like, okay, I'm going to play this melody and it's going to be beautiful, but also thinking about like, maybe the melody doesn't, like the beauty of it can be in this kind of rough, like some rough edges, like the edginess that spirit that comes through in folk music and traditional music players, so like moving away from this like very perfect kind of place and safe place to a more like, okay, let's be freaking edgy, let's push some boundaries here. But then I realized, you know what, I don't really speak Hungarian, and I've been like working on fiddle music and Celtic based indigenous fiddle music traditions for a really long time, and even if there's only like one or two pieces that have these fiddle music elements in them, I can still use those as an example that can be translated into kind of like opening up the thought process for more classical musicians to think about how to incorporate and how to investigate and be curious about bringing in these kind of like edgy folk elements, so going beyond what's just written on the page and bringing the spirit to this like really kind of like funky place.
And how do you do that? Like, how do you communicate that? How do you get how? What conclusions did you arrive at?
So for my doctorate, I really took the pieces of my own story, and also took many different ways of elements of Celtic music elements, of things that wouldn't be necessarily written on a page, because there's a lot of Celtic music that's transcribed, right? I took many different examples and was like, see, look, like, you can do a little ornament here, or even within not beyond just the notes, there's also the rhythmic side of things where, there's a certain lilt and groove to the music, that it's not just like da 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 da, but it's like da 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 da, right? that is hard to write out on a page. And so I'm also thinking about, okay, so I'm going to be writing music and writing more of it and composing. In fact, I was given the opportunity to write a couple etudes for the Royal Conservatory of Music's violin studies, and I got to actually write like kind of a little quick Red River jig inspired etude for the grade 8 level. And so that's really exciting because I got to go like to both places of like, I'm going to make this a little bit weird, but I'm also going to make it really dancey.
Yeah, and then you are, it's like you're doing the thing that you were studying, you know, you're communicating this art form.
Exactly, and it's such an exciting time, and so being able to like composing is it's a relatively new area for me to be in. It's like kind of a little bit scary, but at the same time, it's like so kind of exciting because it's like so new. So
do you like
some
it?
of that, I do, yeah. And I also have some mentors along the way to help guide the process, so that when doubt comes in, they're like, no, come on, just do it, right? So my next project is this violin concerto called A Search for Resonance. It's a commission for one of my former violin teachers, Mayumi Zeiler. And it's the number 7 is very much in this piece because it's not only is it a very auspicious number, you know, we've got the 7 generations, we've got the 7 chakras, and so for me, this piece is going to be about searching for that resonance between like this desire to be human, but also this desire to be in the universe and this desire to be curious about like, where did this all begin? How did we end up here? And how do we continue to resonate with the universe in this collaborative way?
These are big questions. What's your process like when you're thinking about the theme of what your work is and that you want to address, and it's something like that, and then you're like, now this is going to become music. Like, how does it happen? Are you like imagining like different scenes that you're narrating, or is it like something much broader than that where you're just trying to like capture a feeling musically? Like, what does that look like?
It's all of those things, but I tend to like get too very deep into the overthinking process of like, okay, this movement is this and that movement's that, and like these are going to be all the characters, and then I start to overthink it instead of just like get into the actual music writing part of it. I think that's kind of like the academic side.
But I think that part is important because it's like, I think also if you just are creating music and it doesn't come from like some sort of vision, or I'm thinking, I can only speak about dance, but I think in general, like, it's like how writers will be like writing huge backstories to like all of their characters. It sounds like it's the same kind of thing where it's like, it's coming from an idea. And even if it ends up, you know, it's music, it's going to be abstract.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can still tell that like that thought went into it. So I think you're on the right track.
Thank you. Yeah. I just need to get back into the swing of writing again. I've been moving a lot, been moving from place to place to place to place to place. And that's, I'm finally kind of just landed, and it's a good place to be.
You're here in Toronto, right?
Sorry?
You're here in Toronto, correct?
Yeah, I am in Toronto. Yeah. I'm back where I started in Roncesvalles.
Nice, lovely. We're nearby. We could have done this in person. That's the thing that's starting to happen, is because we started this in the middle of the pandemic, where like you really couldn't do it in person, and I'm like, I am a few blocks away. So maybe we'll move into doing that soon. Yeah, I don't know if there's is there any other projects that you're working on right now? Or I know when we spoke before, you had told me about like a recent healing practice that you participated in that was very interesting.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really calling back in for for women and women who identify as women, whether they have wombs or no wombs, but they identify with having a womb space. Like, I am all about pussy empowerment right now. Like, I am calling in that that space of like the divine feminine energy, that because my masculine energy is so strong in me, that I need to bring so much more of that feminine inside of me, and constantly have reminders of like, okay, like, trust pussy. She knows where it's at. And so I practice many different wilding techniques, and I just, like, now that I'm living by myself, where I don't have to be worried about like sounding and interrupting anybody else, like, I can be so wild, and that is so liberating, like, to just be like, okay, like, I'm just like sounding for the sake of sounding. I'm not worried about like what sound is coming out of me. Like, it could be like a growl, it could be like a scream, it could be anything. I'm less of a screamer. I would say I'm like more of like very guttural, like like that's like where a lot of my anger and frustration comes, like in this like really low kind of, and I think that probably some of that masculine kind of just needs to leave in that sense. I have 3 younger brothers, so my mom always identified it as being a tomboy, so I think some of that that lineage is there. But as yeah, I had quite a healing week last week. I don't know what it was in the air. Like, I just started off with this week of like being like, okay, I am going to let go of feeling like I'm too much, like I'm asking for too much, or that I'm making too much noise, or that just this idea of being too much, like even being too much energetically in a space, taking up too much space. Like, no, like letting go of that fear of being too much was like how I started my week. And so little by little, I was like, okay, so what's the next step? Because there's still some anger and fear and sadness inside of me that I haven't figured out like what's going on here. So then I set an intention of like, okay, I have this desire to be fabulous, and I want to step into a place of like being ultra fabulous, that my life is fabulous, and I'm calling in my community to also feel as fabulous as I feel, and setting that like real clear intention of like, okay, so this is where I'm going, this is where the next journey goes, and then
you do every week.
No, this was like a very epic week.
Okay, I'm like, wow, what a life you must have. So yeah, continue, because this week has been amazing.
And so after setting that intention of like really being like stepping into, okay, my intention is to be fabulous. By the way, Desire Map, really good book. Highly recommend Desire Map, because it's all about how do you want to feel, rather than like setting these like really clear like linear goals that are like ego driven actually. And so I'm really trying to step away from being so ego driven, and really act from womb space, because she knows where it's at.
Nice. What is it called again?
Desire Map. It's from Danielle Laporte. Yeah. One of my friends, Jess Salguero, highly recommended it to me, and so yeah, it's a really good book. It's making desires, making intentions with feelings, with soul, and so yeah, that was my intention. Fabulous. That's where I'm headed. Fabulous. And then next it was like, okay, what is preventing me from being fabulous right now? That was kind of my next kind of curious phase. And so I was called to this practice of chode, which is a Tibetan practice of like feeding and nourishing your demon. It was the very first time that I've ever done it, but I also really recommend it, feeding your demon. Your demons. And so something called in me to sit in my bathtub on a Friday night and be like, or no, sorry, it was a Thursday night. It was right before my birthday, like minutes before my birthday. Wow. I was like, what is preventing me from being fabulous? Because I'm about to be 35, and this is like, I'm letting go of all these like weird stories behind me. I am ready to be fabulous. So I asked this in my meditation in my bathtub. I was sitting in front of this, like, and this demon kind of appeared, or this creature kind of appeared, who was like really sad and was like, "You used to have so much fun." And I was kind of like, but I like having fun. Like, what's going on with this fun? Like, what's blocking this fun? And so next thing I knew it, I was like feeding this like sad demon who was like really like, with this like face. After nourishing and loving this demon, the demon then transformed into a duck. And this duck, this fabulous duck, was like, "You're a duck." And I'm like, "Yes, I'm a duck." And I started to quack. I was like, "Quack, quack, quack."
You're like,
I was like, if somebody tells you, no, I thought you were a goose, put that goose mask back on, I'm going to be like, "No, I'm a duck."
own it.
I'm going to own this duck. And because the ducks, they don't give a fuck. They're just ducks. You know, they waddle, they're cute. They're like, they're on the land, like they're closer to the ground, which I kind of need to be closer to the ground because like I'm like, I have this tendency of being a little bit more flighty. So calling in that duck energy is really grounding, but it's also kind of silly, you know. So,
and fun.
And fun and fabulous, because ducks are also fabulous. And
There are.
When I noticed after having this duck ally come and join my fabulous party, every time I kind of was having this feeling of anxiety or feeling of like being too serious or like anger that was bubbling up inside of me, I just was like, "Quack, quack, quack." And then I started to giggle. It was so like, it was like, I just needed to be reminded of the playfulness that resides inside of me that was being suppressed, and that duck is just, it's there to remind me of that. And so really, I encourage everybody to find whatever animal it is, like, and really embody that, like sound it. Like I'm a sounder, but some people are more of like, you know, movement based. Some people are more like they need to journal about it. So I so highly encourage that discovery and curiosity.
Yeah, I've never even thought of the idea of like being a sounder, or like just be like, or the idea of like that I'm in when I'm alone in my apartment, that I could just be like making noises and stuff, and that it could be like when you were talking about that, I was like, why don't I do that? Like, what's stopping me? You know, it's something that like literally had never occurred to me. I do like dance around in weird ways, but it's like, oh, maybe this is something else to explore, because there is something very powerful about the voice. It's like, it can make you like singing or like making noises. It can bring out like really powerful emotion.
Yeah. And the voice is also, voice is connected to womb space, like those two chakras. I've heard from many people that those two are very much connected. And I'll just end with I'll end the duck story with so then Kune later, like the very next day on my birthday, we had a gig, and I forgot that I was singing this song, "La le bon vent," which tells the story of the son of a king who's going duck hunting. And so I really got into the story because I was like singing in this old French, and I was singing about killing ducks, but I was like, no, ducks are my friends.
You're like, I don't agree with this anymore.
No, we can't kill ducks. Save the ducks.
Asterisk on this. Well, you have to talk with the band about that. Maybe replace it with another French standard.
I actually think it's quite, it's funnier that way. It's funnier that way.
It is. Well, I wonder if before we go, if you could maybe play something for us or share some music with us.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Wonderful. I just so happen to have my fiddle behind me.
How convenient.
And so I'm going to play for you a piece that was taught to me by Taddy Boy. It's called Hey in the Loft and Six Nations Reel. They're both really fun tunes, and if you're at home and you have a little bit of dancing movement space, you can dance. Or, you know, if you're a sounder, maybe you just like hum along. Or if you're somebody who just needs to have some, you know, resting time, it's all invited. So here we go.
Wonderful.
Hey in the Loft, Six Nations Reel. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so
so
much.
and so long. I'm like, oh, that felt good. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
It reminds me of being at a festival or getting a chance to kind of, I miss having someone to like swing around, to loop arms with.
Yeah, that's true.
When are you going to be performing outdoors or anywhere, online, anywhere in the next few months or?
Well, Kune is doing some live workshops for one of the libraries, and we're yeah. So you can check our Facebook page, and I think our the link is in the Instagram. So follow at Kune World, KUNE Kune World.
We'll get Tamara to throw it in the comments here.
And it's
and it will be on our website.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, we're doing like a bit of a jam session at 4:30, and then a quick break, and then another kind of little presentation Q&A with the group. So check that out on our. We have the links posted on both our Facebook and our Instagram. Yeah, last week was the first time that I had some live shows in a really long time. And there's going to be some. We're going to be kind of like, I'll be probably, hopping around to the kind of the world music scene around here in Toronto. And you know, maybe there'll be more crooning gigs. But
Yeah.
for now, I'm just going to be resting duck face.
Um,
I couldn't even do it. I couldn't even do it.
yeah, you're like, I'm too funny. I'm too funny. I can't. Resting duck face is really good though, because it's also a thing. This one, right? People like call that ducky face. But it's hard to do when you're laughing, which is good. Is there anywhere else people can follow you? Here on your Instagram.
Yeah, here on my Instagram, I'm working on building a website for myself. So when that comes out, yeah, I'm resting duck.
Well, people can follow you on Instagram, and then, you know, I'm sure you'll announce it there.
Yeah, exactly. After I finish my resting duck phase, I'll, I'll launch myself and start to waddle into social media again. I've been kind of taking a bit of a break. That's part of the reason why I had a hard time getting on today, is because I have so many blockers.
Yeah, once in a while. It's healthy. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. This has been very fun and very hilarious and enlightening and beautiful. And yeah, thanks so much for being with us here today. Everybody follow Alyssa, and you can check out everything that we're doing at FabCollab at our website, fabcollab.ca. And we also have links to all of our guests on Curtain Call there. And you can follow us at FabCollab Live on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And we'll be back next week, same place, same time, with another wonderful guest. So thank you so much, Alyssa, and have a wonderful day.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks everyone for coming. Chimigwech.
See you later. Miigwech.